Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Those Coffee People podcast. We, Melany, and today we are going to dive in how to take the coffee business beyond just good coffee. Today we have Marco from Orgullo Coffee, a brand that is not just selling amazing coffee, but it's inspiring with the stories behind the coffee. So let's start. Hi, Marco.
Hey, Melany, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So the first thing is take us back in the early days of Orgullo Coffee, how it started and how was all the planning and to build a business around coffee.
Yeah, so hi everyone, Marco Fuentes. I'm one of the co-founders of Orgullo Coffee, and we are based in Austin, Texas. And our thing is that we focus exclusively on Honduran specialty coffee, and which kind of leads us back to the question that you just asked. But my co-founder, it happens to be my wife, and we kind of just there's a reason why we focus on Honduran coffee only. One of them is I'm Honduran. I was born there. I lived there for the first part of my life before moving to the U.S. But my wife and I were just like regular coffee drinkers. We kind of learned or grew into drinking coffee after college. We went to our jobs, independent jobs, and we just kind of drank whatever coffee was in the office. And you kind of start thinking that, hey, this is just how coffee tastes. You know, I have to put a lot of, in my case, a lot of milk to kind of mask the bitterness. And you just think that's what it is. So we would just buy whatever coffee was the cheapest on the supermarket, all the commercial brands here. And so my mom, when she would visit us, like maybe once a year, she would bring us like bags of Honduran coffee from the supermarkets down there. And you don't have to be an expert to kind of taste the difference between like good coffee and like bitter coffee, right? So at that point, we were living in New York City. And so that led us to kind of want to switch from whatever we were buying at the supermarket to Honduran coffee. So we're like, well, this is New York City. You can pretty much find almost anything from any culture over there. And it actually was kind of hard to find just Honduran specialty coffee. And so that led us to kind of want to do a little bit more research as to why. That led us down the rabbit hole of like realizing that, hey, Honduras is actually a big coffee producer, the third largest in Latin America. You have Brazil, Colombia, and then Honduras. It fluctuates from like fifth to seventh globally. And it has like amazing coffee. It's the taste that everyone loves in their coffee, almost everyone. It's chocolatey, it's smooth, and it has the full gamut of like, traditional to like experimental, really fruity geisha coffees and stuff like that. It just doesn't have like the name recognition or the branding that perhaps some other origins, other neighbors in their region have. And it has nothing to do with quality of flavor. It just doesn't have the name recognition. So that led us to kind of want to start a coffee business to kind of solve our own problem of like, we want Honduran coffee year round, not just when it's popular here in the US, when it's arriving and it's fresh and people want to have it for a couple of months. We want to have it year round because it deserves to be kind of highlighted. And so we came at this from like not being in the coffee industry at all. We just were people that drank coffee to learning how to roast and starting the company in New York City first for a few months. And then we actually moved to Austin, Texas a few months into the company. And so we've been building the brand ever since here.
In what year did you start the coffee?
We started in 2022. So it was kind of like a side hustle for us at that moment. And then as of last year, 2024, it became like our full-time thing.
That's great. So I'm imagining from the day one to now, a lot of things have changed. So what was the biggest change from the first day to today that you said like, my God, this is really happening?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's a good question. I think the biggest change is like realizing when it's a side hustle, it's like realizing that because this is a physical product, it's not just like a software company where you can build, and like it's just a physical product that you have to roast. There's a lot of logistics behind it. Just realizing that we were probably doing too much for part-time but too little for full-time effort to actually make an impact and actually build a company. So that was one big change. And then once we went full-time, it's kind of like, all right, now we got to, build a company, actually make a living off of this. So realizing sort of like learning along the way, what things actually move the needle and actually can help us grow and like help us make meaningful impact in our community and in building our business, and what things don't. So that was a big thing. And just logistics behind it and like supporting the growth and going from like a small batch roaster, like we started doing 700-gram batches to then moving on to like a 15 pound batch. And now we're looking to move to like a 40-pound batch, different roaster. So just growing along the way, there's a lot of growing pains, but it's fun. It's fun and
Yes.
exciting and stressful at the same time.
Yes, the time when you realize the side hustle
Yeah.
requires full-time
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now that you mentioned that you were like you found a gap in the market from Honduran coffee. So how difficult or how easy was to market and shape your brand? Like we are selling Honduran coffee because it's difficult to compete with other brands, not only brands, but like names, like
Yeah.
country names. Vietnam,
Yeah.
Colombia, Brazil. So how was the process of yes, the storytelling behind the marketing?
Yeah. So I would say we're still in the process. And like you said, most people, when we tell them, most average everyday coffee drinkers, which we consider ourselves like everyday coffee drinkers as well. Most people, when you tell them, oh, this is Honduran coffee, the vast majority, like you said, don't know Honduras. So I don't think I've ever had coffee from Honduras. But the reality is that you have. You just don't know. It's probably been blended away, and that nobody, big companies don't need to tell you, aside from maybe this is Central America and South America, right? So kind of the education, like we're still going through it, and it's like we see it as key, and that's actually kind of our brand differentiator. Where in the beginning we're kind of open to, hey, maybe we start with Honduran, but everybody else is also doing like a bunch of other origins, and we quickly realized like no, that's actually our competitive advantage. Should just be focused on Honduran coffee to educate people. Hey, we promise you've had this coffee, you've loved it, but we have it, available to you year round. We find that, people buy from people, and in a market like we are in coffee, which is, like you said, very competitive, highly saturated. For most, we see as most people, for the end consumer, there's little differentiation between one coffee and the other. Like it tastes like coffee, yes or no. Is it good or bad? And that's about it. So how you stand out and how you build your company is by building your brand, and the why you started the company and what's your story is really key for us. And only focusing on Honduran coffee is a really key part of why we started the company and who we are. We try to lean on and on our journey to kind of educate the world and here in the US, specifically about Honduran coffee.
Yes, that's really incredible. Like how to start competing with these
Yeah.
other countries, and I think going you're doing really good. So because I think the baseline of coffee brand should be a good coffee. So
Yeah.
what was the milestone you are going to looking for? So for that, how was the process of sourcing Honduran coffee? Like how difficult or how easy it was to not find it in blends, or how was the process of sourcing green beans from Honduras?
The process, so it actually, I think in coffee, and that's part of why I think you have so many coffee brands in the US, because the barrier of entry is pretty low. The barrier to scale, that's very hard. And so finding Honduran green coffee is actually easier than you think, because there's a bunch of importers here in the US that have a lot of coffee from a lot of different origins, countries, including Honduras. Almost all of them have some sort of Honduran green coffee. I think the problem is that there's a lot of roasters buying it here in the US, big companies, right? Big coffee chains and smaller roasters, but they just don't, some of them don't need to tell you where it's from. Like you said, hey, maybe this is a blend from a big brand, and maybe they'll tell you this is a South American, a Central American, and an African. Or maybe they'll get, that's as much as they're gonna tell
You'll
you.
never know.
Yeah, you'll never know. Or some of the smaller specialty coffee roasters in the US, they may have Honduran coffee. They'll highlight it for the 3 months that it's like the freshest, right? The batch, the newest harvest just arrived in the US, and it's like the freshest you can get. And then come fall season, the next batch of countries comes in, and then they switch to all the new ones. Or they may still buy some Honduran, but kind of eventually just blend it into their blends, and they don't need to tell you again where it's from. So the finding the green was not the hard part. The hard part is like the scaling part for a coffee business, but also just educating people about, hey, this is Honduran coffee, and we promise you've had it. It's great. You love the quality. It has all the qualities you love in your coffee. We just want to make it easy to kind of for people to discover and enjoy Honduran coffee. That's kind of what it is, and so the education part is the harder part.
Yes, and it's a process that
Yeah,
never ends.
yeah,
Uh, so thinking about that, like how is to build single origin brand
yeah,
to compete, not compete, but in a very saturated market
yeah.
with a lot of coffee brands, but in very big brands. So you start from scratch. So how was like the growth process?
Yeah, the growth process is interesting because so it is hard. It presents a challenge because when you just focus on one origin, there are some risks, right? Because like coffee is there's a finite amount of coffee that each country produces every year. And so a challenge when you are just a single origin is like forecasting enough coffee to last you until the next harvest season because it's not like other country or it's not like a more traditional roaster where like you run out of Honduras. Well, 3 months on the line, you can plug it in with like another origin that importers here still have it. Once Honduran coffee is gone, it's like all bought in the US, it's done. So that's a
That's it.
challenging part. Yeah, that's the challenging part of like forecasting enough and buying enough. How to stand out for us is like once again kind of leaning into that we're Honduran only, educating people that hey, you've had this coffee, you've loved it. We want to just make it easy for you to enjoy it all year round. And then additionally, leaning into the fact that we have connections in Honduras to like coffee farmers and we just started this year to do some direct trading at a small scale, which we can get into just to kind of start bringing in a little bit more of the, that connection, the authentic connection to the origin or the country that we're sourcing our coffee from. And now directly. So,
Yes, I think that's really cool that you mentioned that you start direct trade because I think at the end that's the one of the milestone of
yeah.
single origin to just go direct to the origin. And how was the change or the decision process? Like, yes, we're ready to go direct.
Hmm.
We have like the capability because going direct a lot of times can be like a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
So how was like that decision for you?
So for us, this year was the first year that we started testing the waters on buying direct. And we started off small, just to kind of, like you said, there's a lot that goes into buying direct trade at larger volumes that as a smaller brand, you kind of have to take into account that sometimes if you don't have the volume to do just direct, sometimes the numbers don't make sense. A lot of things need to kind of align. And there's a lot of logistical stuff that we can get into as to why that's the case. But luckily for us, like I said, I lived there for first part of my life. I had a classmate of mine. We were fifth and sixth grade classmates, and he grew up to be a coffee farmer. I grew up to eventually start a coffee company, and so that actually kind of brought us back together. And 20 years later, actually, it's kind of funny.
That's great.
We bought a small quantity of his coffee. I went and visited his farm this year, yeah, early this year, and just bought some coffee, just to kind of small quantity right now, just to kind of get our feet wet, if you will, and just kind of learn, just learn about how to do about the direct trade process because it's a little bit more complicated than you think, and there's a lot more risk than you may think of it, and that you may think of as a roaster in the beginning. So we started kind of a slow approach, and eventually we want to move to a hybrid approach where we're maybe doing half of our volume directly, and then later on, as we grow, maybe do full direct. It's a transition. It's not an overnight thing.
Yes. So you mentioned the forecast planning. We are the exporters. We are based in Colombia. So we've been dealing with forecasting for some clients that it's a really hard thing for us because we source the coffee. We work directly with some farms.
Yeah,
So I think that's one of the hardest parts to convince the clients, please do a forecast for us to know how is the harvest coming, for us to take you the right amount of coffee, the availability, because once the coffee is gone,
yeah,
it's done.
yeah.
So how is your process on do the forecasting? And yes, how is your year round of forecasting?
Yeah, so for us, we have a spreadsheet so that we track kind of our volume year by year, right? Month by month and then year by year. And we kind of look at last year how much coffee we roasted. And then this year we try to put like a growth percentage that could be estimating like how many new accounts we think we're gonna get, or like what is our production gonna look like this year so that we buy enough to last us. We try to do at least 18 months. We try to kind of estimate for 18 months just because, it's a full year, but there can be delays in getting the
Yes,
coffee.
the
So a lot,
process,
yeah.
the weather.
Exactly. A lot of different things could affect the timing of when we get the coffee. So that's what we do. We kind of keep track of how much we roast on a monthly and then a yearly basis and do our expectation of how much we're going to roast the next year and grow and then buy based on that.
So coming back to the marketing side, how is your because you roast yourselves,
Yeah.
you don't have a coffee shop. So how is the process on going to coffee shops or stores to
Yeah.
sell your coffee, like to convince people?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. It's not because just overall, it's like you said, it's a saturated market, right? It's you and 100 other brands within the same city, especially when you're in like a metro city like Austin, Texas. So we try to go out there from multiple different areas. So we have some wholesale accounts. We have some corporate accounts, offices that kind of, they have coffee and they want to buy from a local roaster. So we try to approach it that way. We have some food service clients, some coffee trucks that sell coffee, and they want to also buy from local producers. We have some local independent grocery stores that have taken a chance on us, and so far it's going really well. So just there. We're lucky that Austin, Texas, too. There's a big emphasis on supporting local brands. So if you go to like a supermarket here in Austin for coffee and for a bunch of other categories, you'll find that there's a lot of local producers, local companies on the aisles of supermarkets. So there is kind of that desire to support local. You still have like national brands, but you'll see a lot of local brands as well. So starting, it's a process. You got to start small. You got to start with local independent stores. You got to do well. We track kind of like our sales there, how much coffee we sell, bags of coffee we sell on a weekly basis there, and then build that kind of like the data and the sales story to go to like bigger and bigger stores. And that's kind of in the process that we're in right now is like we're in a couple of independent stores, but now we want to start getting into, bigger stores, but you need to come in with some numbers to kind of back up and kind of make the decision a little bit easier for them to give us a chance. So it's give and take. We do a farmers market still here in Austin. So that's kind of our way to have like direct connection with the end consumer and also kind of helps us spread brand build, if you will. And
The educational part.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we got some other things you know, that we're thinking of to potentially get deeper or get more connected with the coffee drinker, if you will.
So I think that's one of the hardest part.
Yeah.
Do the networking and sell your
Yeah.
product. Like you already know you have a good product,
Right.
but
Yeah.
selling it, it's one of the hardest parts.
Yeah.
So, what should be your advice for new coffee people going into this industry, starting their business, coffee owners, or
Mhm.
baristas? Like, what should be your advice to them?
I think the best advice I can give is like one, start small. You don't have to start out like it can be a side hustle in the beginning. That's fine. Honestly, it's better because you can kind of test out whether people like your coffee or people are resonating with what you're saying, and kind of like you build the conviction to, all right, now it's time for me to kind of go full time. So always start small, in my opinion, and then go bigger from there. I think, especially in coffee, nailing down like what's your story, like what's your why? Why do you want to start a coffee company? Like, what's your story? And you need to have that nailed down, in my opinion. And that's, like you said, it's a constant like evolution of it, but it needs to be authentic because ultimately, how are you going to break through like everybody else, break through the clutter? Because there's a bunch of coffee companies, and, it doesn't need to be like, oh, I only focus on one origin. It's just what's authentic to you and why do you want to start this company, and kind of share that with the world, because ultimately that's what's going to separate you and help you kind of break out into the world of coffee. So I guess those are my two pieces of advice. And because it's not easy, like you said, and it's also you need to have like a strong why because it's not easy to sell coffee. There's a lot of competition and like
Yes.
how are you going to break out is, in my opinion, is what it helps to have an authentic story because people hopefully resonate with that. And hopefully your product is good that people keep coming back because of that. So that's my advice, I guess.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the last question to start closing is what is the next milestone for Orgullo Coffee?
So that's a great question. And we're kind of in the middle of it, actually, kind of thinking it through. So right now we are thinking about the next step into like, do we want to get a little bit more closer to the end consumer, right? The coffee drinker. So discussing a couple of things to go into like, do we want to have a shop or something of that sort? That's one avenue that we could potentially go to kind of continue the growth and the education of Honduran coffee. Or also, we also want to do a little more retail. So building out our wholesale in like grocery stores. So we got a couple of things there in the works that hopefully they pan out. But that's kind of what we're seeing. We want to grow our wholesale channel, particularly kind of our retail, like grocery store clients, and then potentially, do we want to do something that can get us closer to the end consumer by way of maybe not a coffee shop, but something else to kind of help build the brand as well. So that's kind of what we're thinking of right now.
That's great. Well, good luck with the plan. We hope everything gets in place.
Yeah.
And to close, thank you so much for taking the time. And that was a great episode. Thank you so much. Until the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Melanie. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.